forgot. But I am going to spotlight you.
And if you make me host, I can, deal with all the other stuff.
Okay, done.
All right, so. Oh yes, this way we can share with Sarah, because only her mom can be here today, and maybe Debbie and Debbie, I'm sorry, and Miriam and anybody else. So tonight's session, are you guys ready? Is building on what we did last week, and it's supposed to be like the high point. So I'm going to show you the picture from last week, which, oh wait, I went away and did something, so I have to stop and go back to it. Hold on, share screen. Here we go. Okay, here's the picture. All right, and I'll make this a little bit bigger if I can. There we go. Okay, so the start of services on any morning really are the morning blessings and verses of song, and that helps us get ready for Shema and the blessings surrounding it. And then we have the Amidah, our time of personal prayer and also communal prayer. And that's supposed to lead all the way up to Torah. So the Torah service is the big moment. And here's my question for anyone who's willing to answer. If you want to pray for something, is it best to, number one, pray for it right when you think about it? Number two, pray for it when you're really ready to pray? Or number three, when you're in the middle of an important prayer? Or number four, when you think that you and other people and God are kind of all hanging out together? Which is the best time to say that prayer? Right when you think about it, when you're ready for praying, when you're in the middle of other important prayers and you're going to add it, or when you and other people and God might be all together. Oh, let's see. Hold on. Something's coming up in the chat here. I need to. Okay, so I feel like for Max, we're getting another device. I get my nose today. All right, so Max, were you trying to tell us something, or are you talking to your dad? It's a little slow. You're on mute, and your connection might be slow. You could also try typing in the chat if that's easier. Well, I'm going to answer the question one way and then leave it open for everybody. So one way to answer the question is they're all good times, right? Like you think of something you want to pray for it. Say, God, please, please, please help me with whatever. Or thank you, God, for like the beautiful weather. And that was a really pretty rainbow. And I'm going to say the prayer for rainbows. Or, okay, now I, am at tefillah at school or at synagogue, and I'm going to add something, right? When you're with everybody. And here's the thing, that picture I was showing, I'll go back to it for just a moment here, to tefillah structure, right? this climbing the mountain, so Torah is a way of kind of recreating Mount Sinai, where God is supposed to have met us a long time ago. But here's the thing, God is forever. God isn't just everywhere. God is also in all time. God doesn't know like the difference. I mean, God knows the difference between the past and the future. Okay, but God exists in both equally, right? So when God spoke at Mount Sinai, it's not like God's voice stopped all of a sudden. It's still there. So like we kind of try to go back to Mount Sinai, and that's what we do when we get to the Torah service. We say we are at Mount Sinai, and the whole idea is to kind of feel like we're going up. We call people up to the Torah. The Torah is usually on a raised platform, right? The bima is higher than the seats in the congregation. And it doesn't matter whether your bima is at Bethel, like up front, or if it's, in between all the chairs, like it might be at some other synagogues. So we're trying to go up, 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 up. And the question is, for tonight, what do we do when we're all the way that high at the Torah service? Like what's the whole, what are we trying to accomplish? So I'm going to stop sharing that and see if I can get us into, oh, Max, you want to try to, are you trying to tell us something?
Yes.
Tell me.
That is sort of like the progressive rock genre of Hebrew things. The Amidah is divided into sections like progressive rock songs, such as the final section is called a Kedusha.
You got it. You got it. You know what else I like about the Amidah? You remember how many blessings are supposed to be in the weekday Amidah? Do you remember how many? Well, today we say they're actually 19. The rabbis count 19, but it was supposed to be 18. And the rabbis have a funny way of counting bones in your body. So not every bone in your neck and not every bone in your tailbone, but the vertebrae in your spine, right? If you take off the ones at the top and the bottom, there are 18. And they say each of those is like a prayer. So it's not just like a rock concert kind of thing, right? Or it's also your body, when it moves, is making its own prayers, right? So Max, when you got up and you were standing, you were so excited, that was like adding extra prayer, right? And sitting down, that's a different way of doing prayer. So Amidah is pretty cool in that way too, whether we call it the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, or what else do we call it? The standing prayer, right? Because that's what it translates to into English. So tonight we're going to focus on the Torah service. Yes. Max, you wanted to tell us more?
What is the Torah service and what does it do?
That's a great question. That's what we're going to answer tonight. So the Torah service is the service or all the things that we do, because it's our bodies and it's the pages in the Siddur. It's the prayers, but it's also like the motions, the things that like that that we do for reading the Torah. And if the Torah is supposed to be like being at Mount Sinai, we want it to be really special. So this is an outline for the Torah service. And you can see it takes the whole page. Okay, it takes a whole page before we get to the next part of Shabbat morning. Okay, and what I like about this is that, right, we have taking out the Torah. Okay, we're going to actually read the Torah. Then there's this whole thing with on Saturday mornings and holidays reading in the Haftorah, which is not Haftorah. It's not Torah itself. It's a different kind of thing. And then this is one of those things where, like, while we're spending time with Torah, what else might we add? Right? So prayers for the community, and then returning the Torah. If we take the Torah out, we got to put it away. All right. So this is our frame. I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to highlight this permanently into a light blue there. And this is the other bookend. Okay, and what is kind of unusual is that kind of in the middle, we have a Chatzi Kaddish, because we want to make sure that like all this stuff that we're going to do, from taking out the Torah all the way down to here, all of that, we want to say like, that was really important. And like, before we do anything else, let's stop and make sure that we're recognizing that the Torah is holy. So sometimes this Kaddish is, instead of being called a Chatzi Kaddish, we'll call it the Reader's Kaddish. And it's usually said by the Gabbai or the person who reads the last Aliyah. Okay. And I really, maybe I should have included a little bit more detail, but we'll get there. So here's what I want to do tonight. I want to talk about what is all this stuff we're doing to make it clear at the beginning that this is going to be important. And what is all this stuff at the end that makes it clear that this was an important thing that we did, right? And what's all this stuff in the middle? Okay. So first of all, most people, if they're going to be late to Saturday morning services, they will get there in time for the Torah service. They might not get there for A1, but they're going to be there somewhere around, right? Some part of A or the early part of B. So let's take a look. And this week, because last week I just was like talking a lot. This week I brought you a scan or a PDF of the Siddur. So I'm going to actually share the Siddur. Here it is. Okay, so, oops, let's close that. Okay, Seder Kriyat HaTorah. So, Max, you might know how this goes. Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai v'ein k'maasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim. And if you don't know that part, which I would understand.
Mi kamocha v'Elohim Adonai.
So-
Mi kamocha v'Elohim HaKodesh. Nova techi la la la.
So, Max, that part is the beautiful transition from Shema to the Amidah. And this is later, but it's the same idea. There are verses from the Torah that can help us be in the mood. So Micha Mocha is helping us go from like, oh, right, we left Egypt and now we're free and we're going to pray. Here we're saying, you know what? We want to do something really special. We want to feel like we're at Mount Sinai. So we're going to say like, there's no God like God. Ein kamocha b'Elohim Adonai. And God is the King, Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed, through all time. And then we sing Adonai Oz Le'amo Yiten, Adonai Yivarech Et Amo V'Shalom, Av HaRachamim. So all these verses, okay, all these verses are getting us warmed up and making us feel like something special is coming. And this is the part that I'm thinking that is going to be more familiar, because this is the part we do whether it's Shabbat or a weekday. So anytime we take the Torah out of the ark, we're going to say, Vayhi bin so Aharon, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, Be'afutsu oibecha, Be'anusu misanecha mipanecha. Does that sound familiar? Yes, right. So these verses are about when the ark actually would travel with Moses. And what happened when the ark traveled with Moses? Well, the enemies of Israel would go, the Israelites are coming and they have the ark of God, right? Okay, and so that's actually what this line here is. Kuma Adonai be'afutzu oivecha. God, stand up at the ark and make our enemies run away. Okay, and literally like ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha means like they'll flee, they'll the ve'afutsu is they'll scatter, and here ve'anusu they're gonna like go as fast as they can. They're gonna turn their chariots around and go away. And then we change the conversation a little bit, and we shift to the words of the prophets. These verses tell us a little something different. They're gonna say like, But the ark wasn't just how we traveled with God in the wilderness. The ark, when it came to rest in Jerusalem in the temple, that was where we learned Torah, right? And the kings of Israel would consult the scroll of the Torah, and they learned how to be good kings. And so we sing, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. We even repeat it, right? Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim. Right, so we're singing these verses to kind of go, oh, wow, now we're going to shift to actually from God to Torah. And before we actually take the Torah out of the ark, we want to make sure we're ready. So this is a passage from the Zohar. It's a mystical book, and more than just a book, it's like lots of books all put together, commentary on the Torah. And it ends with, sorry, I have to get past the English. It ends with this passage here that we usually sing, okay? Be'ana rachetz, Velishme kadisha kadisha yakira ana emar tushbechan. But I don't know about you. When I see Hebrew that looks like this, I'm like, what? Is that Hebrew? It looks like Hebrew. It's Hebrew letters. The aleph at the end of a word, when it's like this, repeatedly, that is Aramaic for, instead of the hey, that would be ha something, like ha bayit is the house, or ha sidur is the sidur, right? So in Aramaic, they put that sound at the end. So ana is really ani, right? But it's saying like, and kadisha is the holy, the kadosh, right? And tushbechan, right, is the same thing as we would have is like tushbecham, or shevach shelahem, like plural. So what we have going on here is Aramaic. So this was a way that, again, it's from the Zohar, so mystical tradition, but like the ancient rabbis used this language to say like, okay, before we take the Torah out of the ark, I've been singing about Torah, I know Torah is special, let me say something that is in my heart. And what they're saying, let me just scroll to the English, okay, is, right, does it start here? Not on mortals, right? In God do I put my trust, unto God's holy, precious being do I utter praise, and open my heart to your Torah, answer my prayers and the prayers of all your people Israel, for goodness, for life, and for peace. That's the English of the Be'ana rachetz. And you can see the Siddur even puts it in transliteration in case you're not good at reading Hebrew or Aramaic, so you can sing along. Okay, so we do that part to get ready to open the ark. Okay, and even as the ark, well, the ark is open, I'm sorry, the ark is open, but like we haven't touched the Torah yet because we want to make sure not only are we thinking about Torah, but we're like saying, oh, I want this to go well. Okay, and if it's a Yom Tov, if it's a holiday, then we chant God's attributes, 13 attributes, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Bechanu, right? But we're going to focus on Shabbat. Okay, and so on Shabbat, we then take the Torah out of the ark, right? Only after we say something personal, in addition to verses that remind us, do we actually take the Torah out. And then we sing Shema. And Max, do you know what's really cool about this Shema? I'll tell you. After you sing this Shema, if you're the one leading.
Because it's a method of two pieces fused into one. One for the Shema, the main portion is very short, followed by the Haftara, which we all know the most, like you.
Right. So that's what's so cool about this one, Max, is that it doesn't have Haftorah. Instead of continuing to do the verses from the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, whoever's leading services says the one line Shema, and then everyone else repeats it, right? It says Chazan and then the congregation. So we have this back and forth, Shema Yisrael, and then the congregation goes Shema Yisrael. And then the leader will do Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. And then the congregation is going to say the same thing back. Okay. And then what's interesting is really only the leader needs to do this part, but most people sing along. And they'll actually, the leader, whoever's holding the Torah, kind of bows a little bit. Gadlu Ladonai iti. Because we're saying like, make me big enough, God. Make me kind of like enough to meet you, right? So we're going to bow because we're like, not too big. I mean, just big enough. Make me big enough to be able to meet you, God, right? And let's lift up God's voice, God's name, I'm sorry, all together as one group. And then we bring the Torah all the way around the sanctuary, right? For people to kiss or to say Shabbat Shalom to everybody, right? But so that the Torah comes to us and we feel it like close to us. And some people will touch it with their talit, the tzitzit, or with their siddur, and then bring that to their lips because we want the Torah to, right, connect to our lips. And while we're doing that, we're singing these verses. L'cha Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferet hanetzach v'ahod. This is from First Chronicles, chapter 29, I think. And it reflects what King David wanted when King David was trying to get the ark, right, all the way to Jerusalem. So we sing those same verses, asking, especially Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu lahar kodsho, right? God be exalted, and we will bow to the holy mountain, to Zion and Jerusalem. Okay, and then the Torah comes to rest on the table, on the bima, and we're almost ready to read it. Questions so far? Yes, Max. What's your question?
Does our Shema have to be always followed by the Ve'ahata, or does my mom do it as a map?
So it does not always have to have the Ve'ahavta. In fact, there are a number of times when we say just the one line, especially for the Torah service. And sometimes when we are saying just Shema, we what do we add for the one sometimes that we're saying Shema? We say the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, that part we whisper. We'll stop there. Like on the high holidays when we're doing the very end of Yom Kippur, we say 7 times Shema, but we don't do Ve'ahavta at all. So this is one of those times when we're up here, we say it twice, once the leader and once the congregation. Yes, Max.
What about when I go to bed?
When you go to bed, it's better to also do Ve'ahavta, right? Because that makes it clear that like
it with me.
he does it with you. Yeah, I like to do the angel part that some Sidurim have after with Michael on your right. This is my right, sorry. And Gabrielle on your left and Uriel in front of you, Raphael behind you, right? So I'm glad you do the bedtime Shema. It's really important and special. And the cool thing is, Max, this is what I love about Shema, is the Shema is actually Torah. So if we want to be serious about Shema, then we should, think about how the Shema has its, and Ve'ahavta has its own melody. Okay, so how quickly can I do this? I think I'm just gonna have to do it this way. I have a book in front of me. It's called a Tikkun. And chapter 6. I'm almost there. So here it is. No, that wasn't it. Here. Chapter 6 starts. Maybe maybe I'm reading this. Oh, that's still chapter 5. Chapter 6 is not until the end of the page. It's over here. Here, okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Okay, and I'm gonna hold up this tikkun, and if you look here, okay, this is, sorry, that should be Shema Yisrael. Yes, okay. But in the Torah, it looks like this. So in the Torah, it doesn't have the vowels, and it doesn't have the what are called trope marks. So I have to let that focus a little bit. So when we get to Ve'ahavta, it's Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. All right, and the punctuation is that melody, is the trope marks. Okay, and so when you sing Ve'ahavta at night, Max, you're actually practicing chanting Torah. And when you come to your bar mitzvah or any other time you read Torah, right, then you are going to be able to apply the same mercha, tivcha, the etnachta, all the different trope marks you can apply to whatever Torah you're going to end up reading. And the trick is, I'm going to go back to my screen sharing thing.
It's making the brown paper bag decorating and then putting the flowers in.
Okay. It's when we want to chant that Torah in that special melody, right? We want it to be special. So one of the ways we make it special is instead of just saying like, hey, you come up and read some Torah, or come stand by the Torah while someone reads it, we say all these words, right, to call somebody up. And we make a bigger deal on Shabbat than we do during the week. During the week, we might just say Ya'amod, right? We just do this line. Right, let me see if I can get on the line. We'll do just this line here. This line, okay. Or maybe just this one. These are the same same kind of thing. It just depends on whether you're calling it Kohen or not doing Kohen Levi Yisrael, which are just different tribal statuses in terms of who's descended from Aaron or his family. All right, but on Shabbat we're going to add these. Vayazor vegen ve'hoshia leho chozim bo v'nomar amen. Hakol havu godel Eloheinu kavod laTorah, and then we call the person up, right? And when we finish calling them up, whoever's the Gabbai, whoever's doing the calling, is going to say Baruch Shenatan Torah Lemo Yisrael Biktu Shato, and all of us are supposed to say Ve'atem hadbekim baronai elahechem chaim kolchem hayom, and those who cleave, who kind of hold fast to Adonai our God, to the living God. All of us are living today. Like we're saying like this is a really special moment, and we're all going to be there for it. So we make that special call, and even then, sorry, the person who comes up, who has an aliyah, and again, aliyah means to go up, literally to like rise. Okay, they have to say blessings before the Torah is even read. So we're going to make a big deal out of there's a blessing before, and the blessing includes, let me just scroll up here. The blessing includes this idea, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, thanking God for choosing us from all the people to give us Torah, and thanking God for giving us Torah. And then we say, thank you, God, afterwards for giving us Torah, but we talk about it as a Torah of truth. So let me just, Torat Emet. Okay, so after the Torah is actually chanted, we refer to it as a Torah of truth, and say that it's giving life as like a seed is being planted in our midst. We're so happy to have this Torah with us to give us like a taste of the truth. And and that's not even like the actual reading of the Torah. So on Shabbat, there are supposed to be 7 different aliyot, 7 different times that someone will come up to the Torah. And then the tradition at Bethel is actually, no matter which part of the triennial, we break the Torah parsha into 3 parts. So it doesn't matter whether we're in the first year reading the first part, the second year reading the middle part, or the third year reading the third part. We always go to, for the last reading, the maftir, we always go to the end of the whole Torah portion. Okay. Oh, hi, Sarah. Glad ballet is over. So here's the cool thing. I don't know if I can actually show it to you well, but I'm going to try. Is after all these blessings we say during the Torah service, I'll come back to that in a moment. Okay. For that last aliyah, after we say the Chatzi Kaddish, oh, it's in the next, I have to stop sharing this document and share a different one with you. Share screen and Shabbat. Hold on. I had it open before. It's a different window. Open reason part 2. Okay, now back to share and part 2. Okay, so part 2 of the Torah service has the Reader's Kaddish. So when we finish the 7 aliyot, we stop and we say, big deal, like we just did a lot and that was the whole point, and like this is, you couldn't get any better. Holy moment, Reader's Kaddish. And then before we actually lift the Torah, we call the maftir, okay? And, oh good, it's here. We call the maftir. The maftir is the person who reads the Haftara. So maftir, I'm trying my hardest here. Tier. Okay, so maftir looks a lot like Haftara. So maftir, right, is the person who makes the Haftara happen. But we call them for the last sort of either repetition of the last few verses of the Torah reading or for the very end of the Parsha. Okay, so, you know, if we're in the first third or the second third, Rabbi Bitran is going to have you read the end of the Parsha. That way you're always connected to the whole Parsha. And if it's the third, which next year will be, so Sarah, you're going to actually probably get to repeat the last few verses instead of having to learn a whole new set. Go you got lucky. You'll get to repeat the last verses of the Torah reading because we're reading the third this coming year in 5782. Okay, so, but hold on, let me stop sharing this and go back because there were all these cool blessings. And we started our conversation by saying, when is a good time to say, you know, real blessings, whatever's on your mind. And why is preview giving me trouble? Window. Okay, and part 1. So one of the things we said, oh wait, I don't know what I'm sharing with you. One of the things we said is that a good time to say a prayer is when you want to, or when you've warmed up, or when you're already saying other blessings, or when everyone's all together and in theory, we're meeting God together. So after any single one of the Torah readings, the person called up might get a special prayer said for them, right? Here's one for a bar mitzvah. Misha berach avatenu Abraham Yitzhak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Leah, hu yevarechet, right? Max, I don't know if you're a Mordechai, Ben Daniel, right? Shegiel mitzvot. So because you just reached the edge of mitzvot. For girls, Misha berach avatenu Abraham Yitzhak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Leah, hu yevarechet Sarah bat Tami. Just because I don't know your dad's name, right? Shegiel mitzvot, right? And you're coming in honor of your bat mitzvah. So we're going to say a special blessing for you. But also, if you're sick and you can't even come to synagogue, we're going to say a blessing for you, right? We stop usually between the 4th and 6th aliyah, so either right before the 5th or right after the 5th, and we do the prayer for those who are ill. But we might do a prayer for a mom who just gave birth, or for parents as they're naming a daughter in synagogue, or parents of a son, and we want to announce his name in synagogue. And there's another blessing listed here. I have to go back this way though. That is for someone who survived something a little bit scary, maybe. They traveled far away, and it wasn't as simple as just getting on the train or getting on a plane, or maybe they got hurt and they're okay. They got out of the hospital. They're going to come and say Birkat Gomel, thanking God for not just like a Shechianu kind of thing, but also for giving favor, right? And showing us that like things can turn out okay. So we have all these different blessings, and there are more. There are like ones that aren't in this Siddur. They're in the Rabbi's manual. Rabbi Vitran has lots of blessings he can offer. Okay, and so we want to make the Torah a special moment. People who come to the Torah, we're going to recognize them specially. We're going to give them special blessings, and then when we finish the Torah reading all 7 aliyot on Saturday morning, we say the Chatzi Kaddish, or the Reader's Kaddish. We call the maftir, which is a big deal because the maftir is going to kind of help bring us a whole kind of parallel Torah. I'll say that more about that in a minute. Okay, so then finally, I think this is at the end of this document. No, I have to close this one. Finally, we lift and dress the Torah, right? Vizo tatorah asher samoshe. Anyone here have some friends who are Sephardic, or have you been to a Sephardic service? No? Okay, so I want you to know something really cool. Sephardic congregations, their Torah doesn't look like the Ashkenazi Torah you see at Bethel. It actually looks more like a box. It looks more like a box, and so what they do is they carry the box at the beginning, right? And then before they put it on the table so everyone can see it, they open the box, okay? And that's where the Torah is inside the box. So they show everyone. And at the beginning of the Torah reading, everyone says, Vizo ta Torah asher samoshe, right? This is the Torah that Moses brought. So they show it, and then they put the box down and they read the Torah is standing up. Okay, so it only has top handles, it doesn't have bottom handles. But in an Ashkenazi version, like Bethel does, where you have the handles on the bottom, at the end of the Torah reading, someone lifts the Torah up and shows, you're supposed to show 3 columns, it doesn't matter that much, shows the congregation what we just read, right? And then sits down in the chair and someone helps them roll it up and put all the clothes back on, right? We treat the Torah like a person with great honor, and like all the special layers and the silver, and like it's really important to us, right? So we sing that part that's right here, Vizot HaTorah, as we are lifting and dressing the Torah. And then the person who's going to chant the Haftorah comes, right? And they say the blessing before, they're going to say a blessing after. But what is the Haftorah? Anyone want to give it a shot what the Haftorah is? Or what it's supposed to do?
Basically a singing the Torah. It's to give you an idea of what the ancient writings are and the transliteration.
So you're on the right track. It's not the Torah, right? But there was a time in our history when, particularly the Romans, wouldn't let us study Torah. So the rabbis said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to study different parts of the Tanakh, all right? Tanakh being Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. So we're going to not do Torah, the first third. We're going to do Nevi'im or Ketuvim. And they chose different passages, usually from Nevi'im, that had something in common with the Torah portion. Okay, so if the Torah portion is talking about building the tabernacle, let's find the part of the prophets where we're building the temple, where Solomon builds the temple. If we're talking about a time when Miriam has leprosy. Let's talk about a time when there are lepers outside the city who end up telling David that the army fled, right? So it's connected by subject so that we remember what the Torah would have been if we were allowed to read it, if the Romans weren't saying no. And it allows us to kind of, learn extra and to do something from a different part of Tanakh. Okay, so it's not Torah, it's not the Haftorah, it's the Haftara, and it's from prophets. It might be Isaiah, it might be Jeremiah, but it might also be 1st and 2nd Samuel, or 1st and 2nd Kings, or it might be Micha or Ovadia. You might get some like really minor prophet that you get to read from. And who knows, that could turn out to be something that Martin Luther King like made famous, right? Or it could be something that you're gonna have to work hard to figure out what it is trying to say because it's in poetry. Or it might be a story about Elijah the prophet, and then you'll be like, oh, Passover. So you get to chant that in a slightly different melody because we want to make it clear we're not doing Torah. So we don't want the Romans coming and getting us in trouble and putting us in jail. So it's going to be a little bit more of a different melody instead of it'll be more like right? It's like kind of not quite a minor key, but a little bit different. And when you're done with that and you say the blessings after, if it's your bar mitzvah, like, whoa, you did the hard stuff. You really led us in learning and connecting to God and recreating this whole Mount Sinai moment. So we're going to throw candy to sweeten the moment, or otherwise just cheer for you, Mazel Tov, and like make a big deal. But we still have Torah service left to do. Okay, so I know we started late, so I'm going to go a few minutes extra, but let me show you what's left in our outline, because we did a whole lot from the Siddur, right? Haftorah, blessings before and after, prayers for the community. This is one of those like, let's say a prayer for peace. Let's say a prayer for the United States or for Canada, or let's say a prayer for Israel. And not just like for the country, but for the leaders and for the people who protect it. So we add all of this while the Torah is still out, even if it's sitting to the side. And then, right, it's sort of like, oh, wait, what else might we add while we're all together, while we're doing those special prayers? So if there's going to be a new Hebrew month, we're going to make a big deal out of it. And there's a whole page on page 150 to announce a new month. And Sarah's mom and I were talking, like, you learned Ashrei. Everyone on this call, I know you know Ashrei, right? So we said last week that the tradition is to say Ashrei 3 times a day, once in the afternoon, and usually twice in the morning. So it was part of the Psuke de Zimra. Where else should we do it in the morning? This is where we do it while the Torah is still out, because right, we're saying verses that are supposed to be right connecting us to God, and before we kind of in some ways disconnect from God, before we kind of like put the Torah away and step down from the mountain, we want to remember Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Sarah, I think you're the one who told me it was like all the letters except for Nun last week, right? So we're going to say Ashrei again. And this one, we make a point of like, particularly if you're a bar mitzvah, you get to chant and people will respond to you. Okay. And then we have the verses for getting everyone's attention. Oh, wait. We can't just like be done and like leave the Torah sitting to the side. We got to put it back in the ark and like close this whole process, right? Because it's supposed to be really a big deal. So let me just switch briefly to the Siddur again and show you what that looks like, and then I'll take any questions. Okay, so we have all these blessings, including the prayer for peace, right? Which is usually, again, read responsively. And it's based on verses. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. That's Isaiah. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Pretty sure that's Micah. Excuse me, it might be Hosea. Okay. And here's the prayer for the new month. Here's Ashrei. Here's the rest of Ashrei, right? And then what? Okay, then we have, all right, let me get your attention. Everyone stand up. Yalu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav Shemo levado, hodo al eretz v'shamayim. Right, so you get everyone's attention, and then march the Torah around. You're supposed to go the opposite direction and go a longer route, because we want to go the short way to get to Torah, and we want to I don't want to leave the Torah so quick. And in fact, when you go up, some people have the tradition that you take the shortest route from your seat to the Torah table. And when it's your turn to leave the Torah table, some people will walk backwards because they don't want to turn their back to the Torah. It's a custom. It's not a rule. So if you forget, don't worry. But you'll see some people do that, and that's what they're trying to show respect. And we show the same thing when we're putting the Torah away. We'll go the opposite direction, maybe slightly longer, while we're singing this Psalm 29. Havu ladonai b'nei mim, havu ladonai kavod va'oz, havu ladonai kavod shemo, yishtachavu ladonai b'hadrai kodesh. And if you're leading it, you're going to have to pay attention to where we are in the Siddur, because only you are going to be Kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod yirim Adonai al mayim rabim. Then everyone will sing with you again. Kol Adonai ba'koach. So just kind of be aware of that back and forth with the congregation. We put the Torah into the ark, okay, and that's it. And then we usually mumble the first few lines of this, right? But then we end with Eitz Chaim Hi. Where's my little annotator? Here we go. Eitz Chaim Hi. Eitz Chaim Hi lama chazikim ba. I don't know about you, but there are other melodies that are more fun. We don't usually use them because we're sad to be putting the Torah away. We want to remember that it's a tree of life, right? But we're also a little sad to be saying goodbye. And then when we finish, right, this Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yaminu kedem, when we finish that line, the ark is closed, and people don't always sit down, but often they will, because next is usually the sermon, or if it's your bar bat mitzvah, you'll give your Dvar Torah and explain a little bit more about what this was all about. But going back to the beginning, just one last thing here. Oh, I closed it. I'm gonna have to find it again. Right, we reached the height of the service. Shabbat morning tefillah structure. Right, we went up, up, up. Here it is. We went, it's a little hard to see. Oh man, hold on. We went right up this whole chain to the top to Torah, right? And we could just conclude, right? But what I'm gonna talk to you next week about is Musaf. Why are we adding more? And also, just in case there are other situations, if you're going to attend a bar bat mitzvah in the afternoon or on a weekday, what might be different? So you have a sense of how this Saturday morning outline kind of matches up with any other sort of service. So, questions? Now you're good? This is all right? You're learning something, yes? Oh, okay, good. Because there's always more we could do. When we get to Musaf and the other stuff, I'm going to kind of try to tie in a little bit about what you can do to make things more your service. So whether it's your bar or bat mitzvah or somebody else's, when you're sitting there and we're going through whatever part of the service we're at, right? Not just how does Musaf fit in as this additional piece, but where do I fit in if I'm Sarah, if I'm Max, if I'm Sarah's mom, if I'm Nelia or any of the other Rohachas, right? Or me, or Jeremy. All right, good. All right, so next week, same time, same link. Hopefully we'll all log in and do well.